Well, this is going to be the third UNESCO Chair, ours, that of the UNED, and it is very good because we are going to see three totally different chairs from three different universities as well, because ours is a chair dedicated purely to distance education. That is to say, its objective has been from the beginning the objectives that distance education has. Let's see if I manage, because this is what moves. It moves. That is incredible. It's totally alive. Will you throw it to me? Hands up. Let's see if now I can pass it. Well, let's go quickly because we are running out of time. Let me introduce the university, because in this case it is a totally different university. That is, we are a public university, national, with extension and local centers as well. That is, we are an online university with face-to-face support throughout our network of local centers and abroad, with more than 100 sites in 17 countries. We say that we are the largest campus in Europe. That is to say that it is a massive university, one of those that Daniel said were mega universities. Therefore, with all those complexities from the year of the age of the university, with 51 years of experience in distance education, that is to say that our thing is distance education. But evidently with the innovation that distance education requires, integrating technologies. This is especially true since the year 2000 in this virtualization plan, and now the digital transformation, etc., which we have all been following, but which in our case is also particularly relevant because we need to reach the student. We have all kinds of training like the rest of the universities that are going to be here, and we have recently added micro degrees as well. That is, micro degrees, both bachelor's and master's degrees. But, and I am going to say a lot about this, we are a public university with a social vocation, because our motto of distance education has to do with that social vocation, closely linked to UNESCO, to attend to people in all the vital and diverse needs they may have, with their functional diversities, with people who are in prison, etc. And we belong to the leading distance education associations. We were born in 1997, in other words. We are one of those two that belong to the last century. We were born in the previous century with the idea of distance education. Let's say that it goes by the via Ricardo Marini Bañez, Dr. Marini Bañez, who, as Lorenzo always says, was the teacher who told Educación a Distancia, don't mess with other things, that this is the future. So he is also responsible for everything that came afterwards, right? Well, in that agreement of 97, he then passed on to Lorenzo Garcia Aretio. I think that already the Vice Chancellor has already made an account of all the history of those 21 years with that international recognition that it has, especially in all the Spanish-speaking countries, for all the impact he has had, and therefore the UNESCO Chair, since he has been its holder throughout these 20 years, which has done nothing but disseminate and work and train for distance education. From the 21st, then it is my turn to take over the baton without Lorenzo, who is our honorary president, at a complicated time, in a pandemic time, when Lorenzo could not be there, even virtually, because we were still wearing the mask. And then, well, this, let's say, third stage begins, right? It is as I say from the beginning, it is a UNESCO chair in distance education for a university of distance education. Therefore, this chair is institutionally linked to the objectives of the university. But the idea is that it also goes ahead of the issues that a university more like ours, so large, can implement. That is, it has to move forward on the subject. In this ongoing contribution, of these years in which there have been critical elements of training, for example, in Latin America, such as the International Master that Lorenzo Garcia Aretio started. I want to highlight all the dissemination networks, because a very important part of our activity has to do with the dissemination and diffusion of distance education in its different modalities. In the different networks that Lorenzo set up, even in less technological times and more where there were no social networks, with all those blogs, his personal blogs, which I recommend, of course, because he's always very active, and then the social networks in which we continuously maintain that link with the people who follow the chair. There is also the Red CUED, which has more than 3,000 teachers participating. Well, we are also providing information on activities, not only ours, to put in contact, in network, what is being done in distance education, digital education, and open education. And the discussion list of the chair. Look, just to give you an idea of the volume, some figures, for example, very recent figures of this blog, not the chair's blog, not Lorenzo's blog, which also has many followers, but the moderated blog of the chair, where we give all kinds of news about distance education because it has almost 1,600,000 visits throughout its history, and only in 1 month it has almost 20,000. With that peak, look at the 2020, how all the people went to look for where there was information on distance education that could be useful to them, or the CUED list, which has more than 2,000 subscribers from 27 countries. And so far, we have about 18,500 messages, thanks to the fabulous work done by the people, the team in charge of the CUED networks. We were saying that peak, but the chair served precisely with that social will to support society, universities, and teachers. During the pandemic, for example, there are all the contributions of Lorenzo almost daily, and videos and so on, and also the people who are in the CUED, and that we were in institutional responsibilities to the calls that, for example, the ministry made us jointly with the UOC to work at that time in the portal Conectados. That is to say, always be attentive to what is socially necessary at that time to disseminate the modalities in which we work. Lorenzo will speak today about READ, but it is a very important element that is not directly linked. That is to say, it is not as such, but it is very much linked to Lorenzo and the whole trajectory of CUED. And since he is going to speak, I would like to point out that it is a very powerful instrument for the dissemination of research in distance education in the Spanish language, and since the year 2024 in English as well, and that it is also in the JCRI. Well, just to mention that the impact of CUED and all the work done by Lorenzo is evident, for example, in the tribute that was made with this vision in education without barriers or borders, with more than 30 contributions, or that this auditorium is called Lorenzo Garcia Aretillo, or, as Laura Alba has already mentioned, the recent award received by ICDE, the Award of Excellence for a Lifetime. And well, that has been quite a touching act. What do we intend now, in addition to promoting the chair and with the vision I was telling you about? Well, we want it to be a chair like a think tank, which is moving forward ahead of what the institution itself can do and the institutions of distance education, because it brings together experts in open distance and digital education from the UNED and other international institutions. Here we have the structure very briefly, with a management team with 15 members and a UNED academic council with 48. 17 international advisors from Europe and Latin America, and the network collaborators, which are about a total of 6. All faculties are represented, with a majority from the Faculty of Education and following the School of Computer Engineering, with the whole issue of educational technologies. So, in that link, in that liaison, we have to make... Here is the list of international advisors. I will not go into it, but you can see that they are in 11 countries, with very well-known people in Latin America, Europe, and Canada. But the exciting thing is that in this idea of generating a think tank, in which we are working to, in addition, strengthen ties, the people who form it have a very broad experience in institutional management. Many of the members have been or are vice rectors of technology and innovation. They are all linked, or many of the people are linked, to positions of responsibility in faculties in engineering schools. We have research on areas relevant to the chair, in educational innovation, and knowledge transfer in these areas. As it is multidisciplinary in many different areas, we intend to converge in these areas of development, research, innovation, training, and resources that we want to offer in the UNESCO Chair on an ongoing basis. In this line, it should be noted that in the creation of a think tank, it should be considered that 10 consolidated research groups of the UNED are represented in areas that are related to the chair, and that therefore we can offer in areas of search for projects, affinities, synergies, internal and external, on the areas that are important for the development of the objectives of the chair, and 17 groups of research in teaching innovation of the UNED. This confluence is also significant in that they are all more or less involved in our university's annual calls for research and teaching innovation projects. And this then results in a transfer of knowledge. So with all that experience, what do we intend to continue contributing now? This is where I want to return to the idea that we are different in some way from previous approaches, because we have this idea of SDG, Sustainable Development Goal 4, focused on higher education, very much in our genes. Why? Because higher education, you know that the increase in the number of students is progressive and almost doubles every 10 years. 380 million people in the world are expected to access higher education by the age of 20. We have to respond to them because there is progressive overcrowding. Although, for example, in Latin America, there is still much to be done, probably in Asia. In other words, there are countries that still need a lot of support to gain greater access to higher education. In gender issues, for example, in our country are very balanced, but there are many inequalities, for example, in Latin America. Therefore, main axis, now we have to renew the chair. It is still the 4th, the 17th, as in these actions. Still, the idea is also to work on this think tank, on the evolution of the models towards digital ecosystems, which is already, let's say, the idea that we are no longer working on a separate university, but we are looking for these confluences. So, towards higher education in a digital world, at a distance, but in a digital world which is very complex, facing great challenges and in a dizzying transformation. And I really like this idea from the EduCourse 2024 report, which says, what is our goal? Meeting students where they are. That is our motto. It continues to be our motto as a university and as a chair, to go to where the student is in their different conditions. But also with this idea of generating these ecosystems, which now incorporate the most advanced educational technologies in artificial intelligence to respond to individual needs towards personalized learning processes. But we continue. The idea distance higher education and quality higher education in the digital era, and I'm going to take some of the ideas that we have taken in Lorenzo's book or in the recent ASAD meeting we had. We want or have to work for an education without barriers, without limits, and without frontiers. This is the idea we are working on and will continue to work on. Without barriers, because our university as a distance education system, and in these digital times, of course, the idea is to support non-traditional students. That is, let's say, our great pool of students to serve, from which the chair has been developing and working, also from the perspectives of institutional management. The adult access. Why? The age range that we have in our university has nothing to do with, and therefore the needs to the usual age range of any university. 82% of our students are over 26 years old. In the rest of the universities, it is only 88.2% that are over 26 years old. That is to say, we are focused on responding to this access to higher education for adults, access to higher education in remote areas, for example, where we are working in rural areas. In Latin America, it is essential to the cultural and linguistic diversity of the peoples, from distance education, in its different modalities and with different generations. Technology does not always reach remote rural areas as far as we can, for example, in Latin America. We must have all the instruments and work from what CUED has been doing. We are experts in paying attention to the functional diversity of students. Many members of the chair are experts in one way or another in accessibility, for example, in inclusion, in moving towards universal design. We also have members who have been directors, for example, of the disability unit of the university, of attention to diversity. We collaborate on international projects, for example, EADTU, on this whole issue of equality, diversity, inclusion, which is not only functional diversity, that there are, for example, immigrants, that there are individuals with special educational needs and people who are in prison. For all of them, CUED has to be providing an answer. Without forgetting training, evidently all this requires that we continue to provide training to teachers, managers, and students in the management of these open distance and digital environments. I am not going to mention here all the experience we have in training, which is obviously a lot, and we are still working on the same. Second idea, without limits, associated with this lifelong learning, in which the university is already working and all universities, but we have to move forward. I really like this idea in a UNESCO publication by Mako Kaltz, who unfortunately, this UNESCO chair is no longer working, but he is still active when he says that the future is unbundled, networked and open, that of micro-learning experiences adaptable, customizable for each person throughout their lives for sustainable development. We are working in this last stage in open education in our platform of an open age with different MOOCs that we have started to launch, but there are already many others from members of the UNESCO Chair that can be endorsed by the UNESCO Chair in distance education. We have made a great modular with the Faculty of Education on educational innovation research because we find it very relevant to generate evidence of what we do, to research about it, or other types of MOOCs, such as MOOCs on educational inclusion with the ONCE Foundation in collaboration with members of the Chair, on generative artificial intelligence, on educational robotics, on open educational resource repositories. One is being prepared on service learning, that line of work in open, but we want to work micro-credentials already in this next stage, based on micro-credentials and micro-degrees of the things we already have done in many of the degrees and masters that can be configured as micro-credential. Why without borders? Well, a university like ours and a chair like ours are working for internationalization now of higher education, especially in virtual mobility. And what we do is obviously build bridges and establish alliances with all the different international associations that exist for distance and digital education, participating continuously as all of us, all the chair directors, in all those issues that call us in national and international events, putting it in the open, and we participate, for example, very actively in EADTU projects, in different projects that have to do with education and e-learning in our universities, and regularly we are working with AACE2 with the CUED, for example, which is the Latin American Institute for Quality, because we are also working on different projects at the moment, studying, for example, an online and hybrid higher education distance education policy. We are working on an international glossary of distance education, collaborated with the OEI in the virtual mobility guide for the learning and collaboration with AISAD, which is the Ibero-American Association of Higher and Distance Education. Let's say that this is our development area. With UNESCO, the same thing, that is, in this last stage, in the World Conference, in the 30th anniversary of the UNESCO Chairs, with Frances Pedro, for example, we met with all the UNESCO Chairs of higher education in Latin America. And already this year, we are very intensely working to start generating with the other chairs from a conference that we did here of UNESCO Chairs of the UNED. We have 4, but also with the participation of the University of Cordoba, which then joined us to all the Spanish UNESCO chairs. And we have made the Cordoba Declaration, signed by 53 UNESCO chairs in Spain, in which, well, there are also a series of requests to the heads of ministries, universities, the crew, etc. We have organized several panels on UNESCO chairs because that is our idea. Some current projects that we participate in CUED, of the internal ones, for example, working on immersive materials such as 360 videos, or a project that is starting now on the application of generative AI in general, to the teaching and learning processes. National projects such as the Agora project, which also has to do with language learning in remote areas using technology, or European projects such as Tuning Callaway Extension, which we have also worked on from the School of Informatics, together with Tuning, to generate indicators, learning results, competencies of everything that has to do with engineering studies. The ADMIT project is launched with EADTU, which has to do with generative artificial intelligence, and another project called DAI, coordinated by the EFM, which is for the digitalization of education in Vietnam. That's what we are now, which we started recently. But as Laura also mentioned, and because we work all this very directly with the Vice Rectorate for Internationalization, let's say that our big institutional flagship project is this participation in the call for European University Alliances. in which we have been working for 3 years. We now consider and hope that we are going to get it because Europe wants 60 major alliances, and this one, the one we propose coordinated by the UOC, is Open EU and is a pan-European alliance. That is to say, of distance universities. They are the leading European distance universities, with other universities in digital transition working from our vision. Transfer, very quickly, we have done several hackathons. For example, we participated in the XTX Ibero-American Summit, which we came in second place of the online hackathons, or last year with the ODS hackathon of the UNED, also through using Teams. This week, we are awarded the Social Council Prize. There is the Observatory of Educational Technologies, which also helps us to generate data, and it is open data, which anyone can use by answering the survey and accessing the observatory's space. And, well, our idea is, towards that 2050, as it says here, to continue contributing from our vision to respond to these global challenges through, of the motto we have here, open education, distance, digital, innovative quality, but without barriers, without limits, without frontiers. In other words, that is our primary objective. Thank you very much.
Anything I say can be used against you because it will take away your coffee time. So I would like to thank the participants for their exciting interventions and tell you that Ángeles had foreseen that we would be late, because that is what usually happens. Then at the end of the morning there will be a round table with Daniel, with Carlos, so anything you have in mind regarding your interventions can be raised during that time. So now we will have a coffee and meet again at 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock, come on, thank you.